Now, look, we all know Big Brother is watching, but it turns out he's actually Chinese. US engineers inspecting Chinese-made solar components have uncovered hidden kill switches and communication devices embedded in power inverters. Now, the Chinese have a direct line, potentially, to the US power supply. This is in equipment connected to the power grid in the US. Former National Security Agency Director Mike Rogers said that Beijing could remotely disrupt Australia's energy infrastructure. He said, America's infrastructure, I should say. He said, quote, "We know that China believes there is value in placing at least some elements of our core infrastructure at risk of destruction or disruption. I think that the Chinese are, in part, hoping that the widespread use of inverters limits the options that the West has to deal with the security issue." I mean, it's just extraordinary to think that we've allowed this stuff to happen. I mean, if it's in America, I'm going to take a bet that it's probably here and other parts of the world.
It's Die Hard 4.
It is.
It's Die Hard 4.
Was it Zero Day with Robert De Niro recently? It's a show. Look, the problem with this is grey zone power, so grey zone warfare, where it's not direct. It's not warfare and it's not peace. It's very subtle, it's insidious, but to what extent it comes under the governance of war, so the international rule of law. So things like it has to be humanitarian war, it has to be direct. This is an attack on civilian infrastructure. Now, under the terms of war, you're not allowed to attack civilians. So this could be through phone devices, it could be through solar panels. We know that Huawei, is that how you pronounce it?
Huawei, I think, yeah.
Huawei, the teleco, those connections in the infiltration in America has already been spotted. But how do we monitor that? Particularly when we have a defence force ourselves, which is very much related to defence, not offence. How do we get eyes on this and then combat it? There needs to be a redrawing of the rules.
Get rid of net zero. Net zero. Well, there we go.
And also,
Really?
Chinese companies.
It had to be solar panels, didn't it? It had to be solar panels.
What did Albert say? The dark satanic mills of the modern age for the wind turbine. Really put that into a new context.
Sorry, I'll let you continue, Angela.
No, I'm just concerned that whereas China, that all businesses in China have an obligation to the Chinese Communist Party to work with them. So if someone comes along and says, "Mate, we're just going to have a look at all your solar panels," they can stick whatever they like in it.
And this is the thing, because you've got TikTok, which is monitoring all the kids on their phones, and then you've got the solar panels that have been all done up, the power inverters so that they can turn off the power whenever they want. I mean, we may as well go down to the coast and stand there with big placards saying, Mr. Xi, come and take the joint over, because we are effectively letting them do it, not militarily, but in every other way.
I'm just glad that Musk has our cars. At least we have someone on right wing that owns us like that. I'm only kidding. But I think you've hit the nail on the head. And I think what we need to understand is that modern warfare is not going to be what we see in Hollywood movies, where we Pearl Harbor, like what we see in movies, in that Australia movie with Nicole Kidman, and Japan comes to our shores and we're shocked that there's soldiers on foot on our soil. It's not going to work that way. And I think that is something that our government, our defence need to adapt to, because they will hit us with tariffs. They will hit us. Remember with COVID, they started putting all these, they stopped buying red wine and red meat, and they put all of these different restrictions. They can get our ports. They're building concrete islands off the north of the Philippines. So I think modern warfare is going to be very much things like this. And I think what is important for us as nations is what Pauline Hanson said. Why the heck are we not manufacturing in our own country? Not only are we in the top 10 most resource-filled nations in the world, we have the space, we have people who are dying for work. And not only that, we're part of a Commonwealth. Why aren't we investing more in our Commonwealth nations for trades and things like that? I think it goes back to we're thinking short-term fixes. It's cheap right now dealing with China. It's cheap doing this, but we need to think more long-term. How can we be in a position where they can't cripple us?
Well, I've said many times, Will, that, it's so funny that resource-rich nations like Australia and our Western allies, we sell our coal, etc., to China and our iron ore, and then they use our coal and our metals to make wind turbines and solar panels and things that they then sell back to us, having used the dirty stuff that we gave them so we can say how clean we are. And then when they send it all back to us in this packaged up model, it now comes with tracking equipment. I mean, how dumb are we?
Well, at least we can feel morally virtuous that we are, no longer contributing 3/5 of bugger all to climate change or the global climate. Yeah, am I allowed to say that? Who knows? Anyway, the fact of the matter is we will need to get to a point in this country where we will no longer have the luxury of investing our time and our resources and our effort into these sorts of symbolic virtue signalling exercises because we are at increasing geopolitical risk with China. Our economy has huge problems associated with it, mainly due to the fact that we keep digging stuff out of the ground and flogging it off to China, and that tap is going to be turned off eventually. And when we get to that point, we're not going to have the luxury of wasting our time with silliness like this, and we're going to have to get serious.
I do wonder, Joe, does it demonstrate just how far behind the 8 ball the West is on where warfare is going?
Yeah, I think perhaps the West generally, I think there was, for decades until probably the last decade, there was this assumption that China, ever since the 1970s, would gradually liberalise. It would liberalise economically, and then it would liberalise politically. And everyone just thought, and that was just taken, that was just basically assumed by pretty much everybody. And that was the way that it was going under previous Chinese presidents. And Xi Jinping has just completely changed the game and just said, well, what if we don't? What if we keep all the benefits of, having market dominance, but don't actually, be more democratic. In fact, be less democratic and more expansionist and more aggressively expansionist. And I think that caught everybody napping. And the other thing that caught everybody napping, which was sort of intertwined, is COVID and this assumption that basically there was just one big world and every country would build what it was good at and produce what it was good at. And Australia, obviously, it wasn't going to be manufacturing because China could do that so much cheaper. So it would make all the stuff, and we do things like service delivery. China would give us all the goodies that we buy, and we'd produce aged care workers or the finance sector workers or whatever it might be. And that, obviously, when the supply chains were cut off and borders were shut down during COVID, proved absolutely catastrophic and led to a huge amount of shortages, and we're still dealing with that now. And of course, China is not a reliable actor anyway. So even once the borders are open, do we really want to be reliant on Chinese solar panels? I mean, Australia barely, I think there's one company that makes them, and they are actually going to start up, and it's part of the, believe it or not, Anthony Albanese's new, a future made in Australia policy, that we are going to have solar panels made here. But then that will be a different form of virtue signalling because they're going to be more expensive.
Yeah, they will.
So you're going to have to say, all right, am I going to decide, like I buy the, the green toilet paper and the green this and that I buy the Australian made solar panels at twice the price?